Hello, and welcome to 5 Crazy Creepypastas.
Gateway of the Mind. The year is 1983, and 5 very religious priests decide to take an undertaking that was, at the very least, interesting. They thought that the only way to get to God was through the mind, and the 5 senses did nothing but get in the way. Search for a volunteer. Only one man came forward, a man whose name is somewhat forgotten. He was in his late 60s and had nothing to live for, so he volunteered for this experiment. The priests, through the man's synapses, cut off his hearing, his sense of smell, his taste, his sight, even his sense of touch. Everything that marks a man or a human. At first, the experiment didn't really yield much results. There was mumbling incoherently of feeling something about something, but nothing. It wasn't until the 15th day of the experiment that the man communicated that something was odd, that he could feel something, he could feel something familiar. 2 days later, it became more specific. It was the man's dead wife coming through to him. He could understand her, he could feel her, he could communicate with her backwards and forwards, which was fine. It was only when the other voices started to come through. He communicated to the scientists that he was in touch with the dead, and the dead were speaking to him, and he started revealing information that only the scientists or the priests themselves would know. 2 priests left at this point. Those are often considered the lucky ones, the other 3 not so lucky. As time went on, the man started to communicate that the voices were getting louder and more urgent and more threatening. The man started to slowly fall into a craze. He was rocking backwards and forwards and begged for sedatives to sleep, to get away from the voices. The priests thinking this is it. He's getting closer and closer to the one true voice of God. They didn't give him his sedatives at all. The man started screaming louder and louder and begged for them to kill him. After a week of this, they strapped him to a gurney. After a day of being strapped to the gurney, the man fell silent. And despite the fact he had no eyes, he looked and made direct contact with one of the priests, the leader, the guy that had organised this entire circus. He looked at him and he said, "I have spoken to God. He has abandoned us."
The photograph pile. A young girl was walking home from school one day when she see a Polaroid pile of photos laying on the ground. She grabbed said photos and started to look through them. The first one she looked at was a black background with a man you could see in the distance. She thought it was a little bit peculiar. She turned to the next photo and slipped the first photo to the back. As she carried on walking home, she flipped through the photos. The second was the man a little bit closer. The third, even closer. As she turned the last corner to her house, she was scared. She couldn't look left or right without feeling fear run through her veins. She was about 100 metres from her house when she got to number 18, and all it was the man's face with detail, trying to give an expression. Number 19, outside her house. There was 2 words close enough. All you heard was a girl scream. The girl's brother rushed from the open house, and all he saw was a pile of photographs on the doorstep. As he looked at these photographs, there was just a girl with a black background in the distance.
White with red. A man checks into a hotel room on a business trip. He goes to reception and asks for his room under the name he had given, and the woman gives him his hotel key. They have a friendly chat, and then she ends it with, "On your way to the room, there is a door on your left-hand side. No room number, but it does have a keyhole. Do not look in this keyhole." The man, thinking this rather odd, thanks the lady and then continues on and goes to his room. Of course, he sees this door on his left-hand side and thinks it rather strange and rather odd, but carries on to his room. He unpacks his case, brushes his teeth, brushes his hair, and then gets into bed and falls asleep. However, it was a very fitful sleep, and he woke not an hour later. His curiosity was piqued, and he knew he couldn't sleep without at least checking on this room. He comes out of his room. The corridor is empty. He walks down the corridor, puts his ear to the door, and hears nothing at all. He falls to his knees and looks through the keyhole. It's a standard room, looks exactly the same as his room, except there, sitting on the end of the bed, is a lady. Completely pale as the white sheets he had just got off on. He thinks it's rather odd, and she doesn't look around, she doesn't move, she just stares blankly at the wall opposite her. He still thinks it's rather strange, but decides to get up, and his curiosity sated, he goes back to bed and has a wonderful night's sleep, not dreaming of the woman or anything in particular. He wakes up the next day with all intents of purpose to find out why this woman was locked in the room. So he packs his bag and prepares to leave. He walks out into the same corridor, past the same door, and he can't help but check in on this woman again. He falls to his knees and looks through, and it's just red. Pure red. He thinks maybe she saw me peeking in and feeling rather embarrassed, had put something red, a cloth perhaps, over the keyhole. He thinks nothing of it and then moves on. He goes down to reception and asks the woman without any sort of preamble, "Why is this woman locked in this room?" And she explains, after some hesitation, "You saw the woman. There was a couple that stayed here not 10 years ago. Both of them pale as can be. They had an argument. Shots were fired and she died." The strange thing, of course, is that although she was completely pale, her eyes were completely red.
The Slenderman. So I was watching the news the other day. There was an article about a little girl that had gone missing in the woods. They say she was taken by a man in a suit. Reminds me of a time that me and my crew were filming in an old abandoned forest in the outback. We was there filming a short documentary. There was no lights, no pathway, and the only way we could see was from the moonlight. At the time, it was a great idea to get deeper and deeper into the woods to get that effect of the creepiness. All we could hear was the birds flapping through the trees and the bats creaking as they flew past us. There was nothing else there. There was nothing else to be seen We didn't see one bear, we didn't see no elks. There was nothing until that one fateful night. In the distance, all we see was a man in a black suit, tall. He must have been 8 foot at least. He looked at us with his white face and slit from a mouth. So we turned around, we panicked and ran. We didn't know what it was, didn't know where it was, how it had been here, how long it had been here. We just bailed. That was the Slenderman. Somehow, it had spotted us. And now, we know what the Slenderman sees, he doesn't forget. Everybody died that day, except for me. I'm the only one who got out alive.
The girl at the window. This happened to a friend of mine. We were out drinking one night in our early 20s, and as you do, one thing leads to another, and stories get told, and it wasn't until everyone had left and it was just me and him sitting there. Dead silence. He retold the story that he didn't want to tell the group. It was around 12:30 at night. He remembers the time really specifically, which is strange because he can't even remember his own phone number. There was a tapping at the window. Now, bearing in mind he lived on the 4th floor of a high-story building. Odd. He walks to the window, looks down, looks around, thinking maybe a bird or something has flown into the window because no one can tap at this window. It's far too high up. Perhaps it's some crazy window cleaner on some crazy extra tipping Christmas service. He looks out again, and there at the bottom is a girl no older than 12 years old holding a small brown teddy bear. She looks up at him with tear-filled eyes and mouths the words, "Why?" Freaked out, of course, my friend jumps backwards and slams the window shut, and back under his covers he hides. Which is fine, of course, until he heard the tapping at the window. He pulls the covers backwards, and there, on his nightstand, is a small brown teddy. And despite the fact that the window was closed, he heard a silent whisper. "Why?" It is a nocturnal scavenger. The closest description is it's like some nightmarish owl, like from your worst nightmare. It also, by the way, controls space and time. So it's like some sort of evil owl-like Doctor Who nightmare douchebag. It's carnivorous as well, so it's definitely going to take